look into getting a custodial account. But that just depends on the risk you're willing to take. And if you can, one way to go towards this is that if, let's say, you're 17 right now, then you might want to spend a few months just learning about everything about how to invest and in the stock market, and then you can wait till you're 18. But if you're a bit younger, then you can first learn about it and then have a custodial account. So examples of side hustles, I know my friend started a YouTube channel, and I know that in the Toronto area, a lot it's kind of a very popular now, but people are kind of refurbishing sneakers and everything and selling, and so they're buying sneakers, used sneakers, they're fixing them up and they're selling them for a higher profit. Yeah, so the compound rate depends on the amount of stocks you do invest in, but it also depends on the type of stock you invest in. So S&P 500 is an ETF. So that's why, and on average, it has given a 10% return. So that's why that will be dependent on that as well, what type of things you invest in. So you can start reading articles on Investopedia to learn more about the stock market. That I think that's the best way to go for it. And yes, as SE editing and Etsy businesses are example. And I know that if you have like a certain skill set, then you can also sign up on Fiverr as a freelancer. Yeah, as I said, for stock markets, the best way to go for it is to read articles and blogs on websites such as Investopedia, and Nerdpolit is also good. And yeah, Investopedia and MarketWatch have those stock simulations that that can be really good practice. Okay, so continuing on, basically in conclusion, income streams provide you with diversification with your source of income. So during times of recession, such as COVID, you still have a source to make money from. So you still have a source of income. And along with your job or your business, you can have a passive income stream, which would help you compound your wealth over the long run. Okay, so here are just some questions I have prepared for you, just to test your knowledge. So what is an income stream? You guys can just write it in the chat, or even unmute yourselves.
Is it a source of income?
Yeah, income stream is a source of income. And how is passive income generated? Yeah, so passive income is generated through residuals, and usually this is through investments, but you can also put in the effort once to maybe kickstart a business, and then you can sometimes even automate it. So the business basically runs on its own, or you can, or some people even kind of automate the business in a way. So there's people working in the business, and then they run the business. So to answer what are residuals, residual is basically passive income that is generated. So residual is just another way to say passive income. So the third question is, what are examples of passive income streams?
Print on demand.
Sorry, pardon me?
Print on demand.
I can't really hear you. If you can just type it in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah, so passive income streams are more like real estate, bonds, dividends, and rental properties. Now with businesses and jobs, those are not passive income streams, as you still need to put in the effort every day to make sure that you're making an income from there. But passive income streams just means that you put in the effort once and the money is generated itself. And then finally, what is compounding? Yeah, so exactly. Compounding is just profit on accumulated money. And with compounding, you just allow your returns to create more returns for you. So you just allow your money to create more money for you. Okay, so the next thing. So now I would go over an introduction to budgeting. And here I would go over what is budgeting, why does it matter, and how does it apply to you? Because it's important to know how to allocate and organize your money. So first, what is a budget? A budget is an estimation of expected revenue and expenses for a specified period of time. So this basically means that your income after taxes will be tallied with your expenses in a budget. And with a budget, this is the process of enforcing the plan that is made, that is based off of a budget. And as important as it is to create a budget, it is more important to follow through with that budget. A budget helps you organize your expenses and acts as an assistance to your overall financial plan. So first we would go over deficit budgets, and in deficit budgets, the money spent is greater than the money the budgeter has. And in this case, your expenses exceed the money that you made or your revenue. With deficit budgets, this can help people kickstart businesses, or maybe if they're facing a challenging year, they might also be in a situation where they have a deficit budget. And an example of this is COVID. And the pros of deficit budget is that it helps people start businesses. Sometimes in the initial stages of a business, people are in debt due to the startup costs, and it sometimes even helps pay the general expenses if someone is having a tough year ahead of them. But cons of deficit budgets is that this is debt, and this debt still needs to be paid off, and you would be charged interest on it. And sometimes deficit budgets can even lead to more debt, and if you're not careful about this, this can put you under a debt trap. So an example of a deficit budget is that in 2020, the Canadian federal deficit was $380 billion. So that means that Canada was $380 billion short due to the COVID-19 recovery plans. And then next we have balanced budgets. And in balanced budget, the money spent is equal to the money that was planned to be spent. So basically the money that you spend is equal to the money that you make after taxes. And in this case, there is no money left over. The pros is that in this case, you are less likely to be in debt and you are less likely to overspend. However, the cons is that this is potentially risky because if an emergency occurs, there will be no money available. And a prime example of such a risk is COVID-19, as we've seen that this COVID-19 has caused many industries to shut down and many jobs were also lost. And in this case, a balanced budget would not be the best fit, as you would still want to have some sort of money left over to pay for your general day-to-day expenses. So the next is surplus budget. And in this case, there's extra money that is left over at the end of the budget. And this is ideal for people who like to have more money to spend on miscellaneous items. However, it is recommended that you invest this exceeded amount or put it towards other income streams rather than spending it on miscellaneous items. The pros of surplus budgets are that you have more disposable income, so you have more extra money by the end that can be spent, saved, or investment, and it's the less riskiest out of the other three budgets. And obviously, you want to have more money left over at the end of the year than have no money left over or be in the negatives. However, a con is that you may be tempted to overspend, but this is really easy to avoid if you create another income stream where you can put your extra money towards, or if you invest it. So why is budgeting important? Basically, budgeting reduces the risk of going into debt when economic disasters, such as the stock market crash, the job market crash, COVID, such things occur. In this case, a budget is very important as it helps you maintain and organize your expenses and how much money is coming in. This helps people reach their financial goals, and such goals can be buying a house, having a certain amount of money in their checking account, which means checking account is basically the part of your account that handles the day-to-day spending, and also achieving financial freedom. And as we've seen that beginning in 2020, the economy has been very unpredictable, and we are currently experiencing a recession, and that means that we currently have unemployment, and since say 2020, we have also seen several industries shut down and many jobs that were also lost. But however, budgeting can help to contribute to change your lifestyle and prevent potential financial stress. And during recessions and tough times, budgeting and having leftover money can be really helpful. So basically, there's 9 main categories of budgeting, and the most expensive one is housing, which represents 23 to 25% of a budget. With housing, this includes mortgages, home maintenance, and this can be repairs or renovations, and property taxes and things of that sort. Then there's transportation, which represents a 10 to 25% of a budget. And this includes gas, public transit, car lease or car financing, and things of that sort. But do be careful that that some of these categories would affect depending on the location where you live, depending on where you live. So for example, if you're living in New York, you might be spending more on housing than on transportation because Manhattan obviously has greater rent, and in Manhattan, you don't really need a car. The next is saving and investing, and this is also one of the more important ones, and this should contribute to 10 to 20% of your average budget. And this just includes saving money from your paycheck and investing it into stocks, real estate, bonds, commodities, dividends, things of that sort. Next is food, and this represents 10 to 15% of a budget. And this includes groceries, food deliveries, and going out to eat once in a while. And next is healthcare, which represents 5 to 10% of your budget. And this includes medical devices, dental, and urgent care. However, for some people, healthcare might be a bit more expensive because in Canada, we have free healthcare. So our healthcare would be a bit less than, let's say, people in USA who would have to pay for healthcare out of their pocket. And next is utilities, which represents 5 to 10% of a budget. And this includes electricity, cable, internet, heat, air conditioning, and anything that is basically needed in the modern life, anything that is kind of like a necessity now. And then the final 2 categories are insurance, which is also 5 to 10% of your budget. And this includes your car, homeowners insurance, or even renters insurance. Then there's personal spending, which is 5 to 10% of your budget. And this includes personal hygiene items, clothing, skincare, and etc. And then finally, recreation and entertainment, which is 5 to 10% of your budget. And this includes movie tickets, vacations, subscriptions to apps such as Netflix or Disney, and basically anything that falls into the rec and entertainment category. And as per vacations, usually people take 1 vacation every 2 years. So next is the 50-30-20 rule. And the 50-30-20 rule is the general norm for budgeting, and it's also popularized by Senator Elizabeth Warren. So basically the 50-30-20 rule represents percentages of a budget. In this case, 50% is needs, 30% is wants, and 20% is savings. For the 50% of needs, you have housing or rent, food or groceries, transportation, and bills and utilities, because these are things that are a necessity, and these are just things that are a necessity to live. Then there's wants, and wants can be dining out, shopping, entertainment, or traveling, or traveling. However, there's not a lot of traveling happening in COVID. Just for fun, why don't you all type a want of yours in the chat? I mean, one of my wants is traveling, as I really enjoy to travel, but I have been unable to travel for the past 1.5 years. Oh, skydiving. Yeah, skydiving is that's an adventurous want. Bungee jumping, that's very adventurous. And the final category is the 20%, which is savings. And basically, this is all your savings, your emergency fund, your loan payment, your loan repayment, and more importantly, your investing and the money that you are investing out of your paycheck. So, are there any questions for budgeting? Okay, So in conclusion, there are basically three types of budgets, and it is best to have a surplus budget, which means you have more money left over, which can be used for saving and investing. And there are 9 main categories of spending, and depending on your situation, you may have more spending in one and less spending in another. For example, housing might be more expensive than transportation if you live in Manhattan. Lastly, the 50-30-20 is a good indicator for budgeting practices. And I believe that now we have a Kahoot.
Yeah, so now we're going to do the Kahoot. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second, and then I'm going to share again, and then we can get started with the Kahoot. And then after that, we're going to be joined by our first guest speaker for the day.
And to answer your question, for deficit budgets, it's not recommended really to use a credit card to begin a business, because you would have to repay that in 30 days, and you won't really be sure if you would make a profit from your business within the first 30 days. And if you don't repay it, then you would be charged a very high interest. The best way to go for that is just to go to your local bank and just ask them for a loan and give them your business plan that you're starting a small business, uh, and yeah, and do it like that.
Okay, so now we can get started on the Kahoot. I'm going to share my screen, and if everyone can go to this code, go to www.kahoot.it and then enter this pin, and then we can get started.
And so my tip for teenagers watching is to, if you obviously have a source of income, or if you get a certain amount of money to spend, then to really like start saving and investing more of it, because as a teen, you won't really have a lot of expenses as you would when you're an adult. So for you, well, your needs, wants, and saving ratio would just depend on what are your needs. So if you're, for example, if you're living with your parents, then you might not need to pay rent or pay for food, and depending on what your wants are as well. So, but for teens especially, your savings should be around 30 to 50% on average. Thank you for that. So to answer your question, Justine, so for investing it, you can invest it in your side hustle, or you can have a custodial account and invest it with your parents or under your guardian or parent.
So we can get started in a few seconds right now, once most people join, because we have 30 people in right now. So we can get started, and more people can join as we go.
I think, yeah, we can start.
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone got that right. And just remember that with income streams and passive income streams are different. Income streams are just a way to make money, and passive income streams are a way to make passive income. Yeah, so income streams, diversifying your income streams helps during recession, and having passive income streams helps generate wealth, which creates more disposable income. Yeah, this is like a trick question. All of these are ways to make passive income, but the correct one answer was all of the above. So technically, everyone was correct. Yeah, so teens can always have a side hustle, and they can always start a side hustle. It's really easy now to start a side hustle with everything being online. Yeah, so budget is just an estimate of what your expenses are going to be based on how much you make after taxes. Yeah, so the three general types of budgets are balanced, deficit, and surplus. Yeah, so with balanced budgets, you would have no money left to spend. Now, obviously, you want to try having extra money, but if not extra money, then you don't want to be in debt either. Yeah, so a con of deficit budgeting is that you would likely be in debt, but it just depends on whether it's good debt or bad debt. And I would be explaining the good debt and bad debt in tomorrow's for tomorrow's day. Yeah, so there are 9 main categories of spending, but just remember that some might be applicable to you and some might not be applicable to you. And for example, if you have rented out an apartment or something, then sometimes your landlord pays the utilities for you. Yeah, so these are all steps to calculate your disposable income. So first you would find out your after-tax income, then you will calculate your essential expenses, and then you would subtract these expenses from your after-tax income. So that was the question from the presentation that would be held afterwards. Yeah. So with budgeting, just have an end goal or a purpose, or your purpose, and your end goals can vary depending on your situation. Yeah, since housing is essential and everyone needs housing, it does fall under the spending category. Yeah, basically anyone can budget. Anyone can gather the knowledge to budget to maximize their value of their money. Okay, so congratulations to Sabrina, Delisha, Emily, Kiki, and I'm not sure how to pronounce the last one, but you all did great. So congratulations to everyone.
Yeah, so great job, everyone. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and we can move on to the next section of the event. So now we're going to be joined by our amazing guest speaker, JD Schramm, who is a lecturer from the Graduate School of Business at Stanford University. So you can get started.
Hello, everybody. And I just need to check one quick thing. Are you seeing my slide next to me over here? Yes? Good. Okay, so it's mine. I can just take it and run with it. Excellent. So good afternoon or good evening, everybody. I know there's people who are further east than I am. It is almost 2 o'clock here in San Francisco. And I'm just thrilled. I'm excited for two reasons. One, to be invited to share with the EmpowerEcon conference, but two, that this even exists. When I was in high school, I had no idea that there was a concept of financial literacy and that I could do things about my finances. I would have completely failed the last quiz because I didn't have that insight and that understanding. A little bit of personal background. My husband and I are about to buy our first car with cash. Every other purchase that we have made of cars and certainly of our home, we've done so by getting into debt. And it's actually really exciting to be, we're huge fans of Dave Ramsey. Some of you may know the Dave Ramsey methodology of financial management. And he's really big about, not getting into debt. But we were well into our 50s before we took a real careful look at our own financial literacy and the concept of having a budget and the concept of reducing debt, be thoughtful about our outgo. How I wish 20 or 30 years ago, I would have had the insights that you're getting already at this conference. And so delighted this exists, delighted that I can be here. When Amrita invited me to speak, she basically said, I'm looking back at my notes, I can present on anything I want. And so that's a lot of freedom for a keynote speaker. But I am going to do my best to tie into your expertise around economics, financial literacy, and financial management, and my expertise around communication. I have, for the last 13 years, taught communication at Stanford's Graduate School of Business, as well as teaching at undergrads at Stanford. And I've also taught at NYU and at Columbia, and guest lectured a number of other places. Would love to know, I was appreciating the chats around what time it is for people. Would love to know, since this is primarily a high school audience, what colleges are you thinking about? What are some of the colleges that you're considering? Just drop it in the chat so I can get a sense of where you're at. Bonus points for anybody who puts my alma mater. Okay, well, I did, that was so that I did not forget to join you today. I'm here, so we're good. I did see UPenn come through. Stanford, great reach goals. I did my doctorate at Penn. I taught at Stanford for 13 years, and I consider that now I have graduated since I left teaching there, but I'm not sure I could have gotten in. So seeing lots of impressive schools. My master's is from NYU, which is a great experience for me. And my undergrad degree was from a small school that no one has listed yet, Emporia State University in Emporia, Kansas. And it was a wonderful education. And so I've had both state school education, huge private school education, and smaller private school education. And ultimately, I think you need to end up at the school, not that has the biggest name recognition or the best reputation or the best ranking. You need to end up at the school that's going to be best for you and to look at that. So that would be my advice in that regard. So the way I have approached today's keynote is approaching life with a mastery mindset. Now, I will acknowledge that I love the term mastery. So we're going to talk a lot about mastery today, and I'll explain exactly what I mean. But in order for this to make sense, I'm actually going to have to use mathematical approach to teach you what I mean about the concept of mastery. I saw the question in the last set about slides. I will be happy to create a PDF of my slides and give it to the conference organizers. So feel free to take notes, feel free to take photos or screenshots, and know that at least the content portion of my slides will all be coming to you. Okay, so what do I mean by mastery? Mastery, we're going to go back to geometry, which for me was a long time ago. For you, it might have been last period, who knows? But in geometry, there's the concept of an asymptote. And that is where you have a straight line, it's going up and down, and a curve that's getting closer and closer and closer to it. Now that curve will never actually touch the line. They will just on into infinity, get closer to each other, but without ever touching. That's what an asymptote is in geometry. And it's a great analogy for what I mean about mastery. I'm going to encourage, we're going to talk a lot about communication, but it could apply to anything, that you need to think about mastery being that goal, and that you want to get closer and closer and closer to it, get better and better and better, but you may never actually achieve perfection. There is no such thing in my world as a communications professor. There's no such thing as a perfect call or a perfect email or a perfect book or a perfect keynote talk at a conference, because everything we do when we write or when we speak, we can always get a little bit better. So my first thought for you, my first encouragement, my first lesson is for you to look at approaching whatever you take on with a goal of mastery. I just want to get better at that, but know that I may not hit perfection. Now, I'm considered a professor of leadership communication, and I actually consider those two to be synonymous. That when I'm brought into a company to work with somebody on a leadership issue, inevitably they have a communication issue. And when I'm brought in to work with somebody on a communication issue, it also ties into being a leadership issue. If I'm not communicating clearly, I can't make it easy for others to follow me. And so those concepts for me as a communications speaker are really synonymous with one another. So the first thing I want you to do is I want you to approach life, approach communication, approach getting into college with a goal of mastery. Secondly is to take aim. Now, this next model, let me make this slide bigger for you here. This next model is hands down my absolute favorite way to look at communication. And that is anything you're about to do, whether it's a phone call or a tweet or a text or a presentation or a keynote talk like I'm doing right now. You need to slow down before you ever start writing or you ever start speaking. Who is my audience and what is my intent? As a result of this conversation, this email, this communication, what is it that I want to achieve? And once you know who you're writing or speaking to and what it is you want to achieve, then and only then can you go up to message. What is the message that I want to leave them with? The easiest example for me to see of this, several years ago, an accounting firm asked me to come in and work with them on email writing. How do we write emails effectively? I said, sure, I'm happy to come in and work with you for a few hours. Why don't you send me 4 or 5 examples of well-written emails and 4 or 5 examples of poorly written emails that everybody in your company's seen, just so I have a sense of, where the bar is with that. And they sent me these emails, and I printed them all out. So I had sitting on my desk 5 good and 5 bad, and I could have easily taken the 5 good and also put them into the bad column. One that stood out in particular was about a 2-page email. It was from the CEO of the company to everybody in the firm, explaining how they were changing travel and expense reimbursement and how to fill out the new form. There's about 1,000 people in the company. Of that 1,000 people, 100 traveled. And for those 100 people, 10 administrative assistants did all the travel and expense reports. So although it was a beautifully written email for those 10 people, for 990 people, it wasted their time because the CEO hadn't stopped to consider who needs to see this and what's the action that I want them to take. Now, I gave you a business example, but you could look at it in a conversation with a coach or a teacher. Who's the person that I need to make a request of? And what is it that I'm requesting them to do? Who is my audience? What is my intent? Then and only then get to message. When I was invited to do this talk today, the very first email that Amrita sent me was a message that was attached to my website, and very clearly the subject line was, speaking opportunity with high school students at conference. And then in a very concise, in fact, I just looked at it again this morning, very concisely, she explained who you all were, when you were meeting, and would I be willing to come speak? Very clear audience analysis and intent. I didn't have to figure anything out. So you want to look at, whenever I communicate, when can I use that strategy of who am I communicating with and what is my intention? Next, I encourage you to deliver with presence. Anytime you're going to stand or sit in front of a group of people, I want you to consider, how do you use everything at your fingertips to speak most effectively? Now, this doesn't mean most loudly or most powerfully, but I want you to think about, how can I bring presence to what it is that I'm doing as I speak? Now, to have a sense of presence, there are three things that are going on. Right now, I'm speaking to you via Zoom, but there are three things that are happening. There's the verbal, which are the words that I'm saying. If we had somebody doing a transcript of my keynote, that transcript would be the verbal aspect of today's talk. Then there is the vocal aspect. That's how I'm using my voice, how loud or how soft. I got to figure out what's going on with this alarm here. It was supposed to go off just so I wouldn't miss this meeting. Sorry about that interruption twice now. How I'm using my voice, how excited, I'll go faster and faster, or I want to let something sink in or draw some suspense, I'll use a pause. That's the vocal quality of what's going on. And then there is the visual quality of what's going on. Now, when I'm talking visuals, I'm not talking about visual aids. I'm talking about how you look, the gestures you use, the posture you have, the eye contact with the camera. All of that is the visual aspect, the body language, if you will, of communication. Now, again, going back to the chat, I would love to have you answer for yourself, when you're listening to a class, you're listening to a talk, what matters most to you? And just drop one word in the chat. Are you more focused on the verbal? Are you more focused on the vocal? Are you more focused on the visual? Just drop that in the chat and let me know. Excellent. Oh, good. We're seeing a good variety show up here. Get my slide out of the way here. Awesome. Oh, this is good. A lot of, and everybody's different. Everybody's wired a little bit differently. And so it makes sense that we would be seeing lots of different answers here. Let me just, if I could hear from a couple of you, I'm going to put you on the spot. Hope that's okay. Shravani, Chitterwar, can you unmute? And you had put down verbal. Just talk to us a little bit. Why is verbal important to you, Shravani?
Sure. Yeah, I think verbal mostly stands out to me because when I engage with something and something sticks with me, it's usually like a clever phrase. And
excellent. Keep going. I'm sorry.
No, that's all I had. Visual, I would say too, but sometimes I get distracted from presentations, and especially when it's over Zoom.
Yeah. Oh, over Zoom. I got to admit, it's not my preferred way of teaching, and it certainly wouldn't be my preferred way of going to high school. But I loved how you said that you listen for that word or that phrase, that item that you can hold on to, and you listen for the content, and you don't want to get distracted by what the person looks like or how they're using their voice. Khadija Islam, anything that you would add to what Shravani just told us? Why is verbal important to you, Khadija?
So I 100% agree with Shivani. But I feel like that verbal verbal is very important, because I feel like I try to catch on to what a person is specifically saying, and like visual is like how they're presented. I kind of don't really focus on that. And vocals, like I guess I do pay attention to that, but like not as much as what they're trying to tell me specifically.
Good, good. I like the way you said that. So now some people are more wired for the verbal, for the content. I often find accountants, economists, analysts, architects, engineers, people who like to look at the specs. They're like, don't give me the presentation, just let me look at the slides. And there are certain job classifications and certain personality types that are really drawn to, let me just see the content. No right or wrong about it, but that's just how some people see it. And I'd love to hear from somebody who chose vocal. Rania Harara, can you tell us, why did you choose vocal as being the item that inspires you the most or influences you the most in a talk or a class?
I would say probably in class.
We lost your sound there. Go
Okay,
back.
can you hear me? It's just like my dad was screaming, but yeah. So I was saying I really pay attention a lot to how the person is speaking. I think she, like the way someone speaks really can attracts you to like a topic or not. Like sometimes someone can be presenting a very interesting presentation, but like the way they speak and like how they speak actually is very boring, so you wouldn't be paying attention to it. And at the same time, you can have someone talking about something very random, something very obvious, but like the way they speak and how excited they are about it can really make you very excited and interested on it. So yeah.
Very well said. Thank you, Rania. We get a sense of personality, of enthusiasm, of excitement when we hear somebody's voice. Or worse yet, we get bored to death. They could be talking about a really important topic and make it dull and boring by having no vocal energy at all. So in order for you to be able to absolutely get into Stanford, you have to follow these 3 pieces of advice. I'm putting people to sleep. I'm telling you the secret to get into Stanford. By the way, there is none. But I'm telling you the secret of how to get into Stanford, but my energy level is so low in my voice that it takes away from it. So that's the vocal quality. And some people are really influenced by how something's said. I can also say the same thing in 2 different ways, and it means something different. Hi, I'm excited to be here to talk about this. Or, hi, I'm excited to be here to talk about this. Change in tone, change in meaning. All the same words, but the vocal quality. Okay, now I want to hear from 1 or 2 people. I want to get a guy in here. I'm trying to see one of the guys who chose visual. And I can't tell by first names. So I'll just ask, is there a volunteer who chose visual that would like to unmute and just tell us why you chose visual? I can cold call. I've taught at the university level. I know how to do that. Yazid, why did you choose visual? Can you unmute and tell us a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I feel like, can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Yeah. So I feel like visual is the most important thing, because I feel like it's what's gonna make me. It's the thing that can keep me, or like follow the person and to stay focused on what he's saying, because sometimes I can get bored. And even though, as you said before, what he's saying can be very interesting, but there is not something going on visually which can make me which can like not make me, very interested in what he's saying. So I feel like visual things are like what's most important to me personally.
Excellent. Thank you, Yazid. Yeah, personally, you just know those visual cues from a speaker are part of what you listen to and you pay attention to. Is it Queven? Quevahem?
Don't mind the pronunciation. It's just pronounced like Kevin.
Like Kevin. Okay, Kevin,
I don't
why
know.
did you choose visual?
Excuse me. I chose visual because for me, like, visual is like something that it like connects with me more. Like when you look at someone and then you like look at their eyes and then like and then like bam bam, and I mean, like, for example, when you're looking at a guy and then like, oh gosh, wow, he's something like that. It's just the, like, there's that presence that commands you even without words, and then it's like bam, you're just dumbfounded.
Excellent, excellent, Kevin. Thank you for that, and thanks for hanging in there with me as I figured out how to address your name correctly. That our first impressions are always visual. You always make an impression of a teacher, a speaker, a job applicant, a future employer, somebody you want to date, by what you see. That's always the first impression. And for many people, that's the strongest impression. Now, admittedly, I'm going to pull my slide back up for a second here. Admittedly, you are going to have to do all three. When you speak, you have to use words, you have to use your voice, and unless you're on Zoom and you have your camera turned off, you also have to be seen. So you have to do all three, but you want to be thoughtful as you learn how to be a better communicator. How do I use all three effectively? Now I'm going to try an experiment here. I'm going to ask everybody who can turn on your camera, and let's see if I can change my view here to where I have, oh yeah, I can do this. Now I'm going to show you, I'm not going to make anybody speak. Thank you to everybody who I already called on. I'm not going to make anybody speak here, but I'm going to show you the power of body language, the power of visual communication. And so what I want you to do, hang on one second here, let me change one other setting. Okay, if you can turn your video on, please do for this next activity. And what I want you to do is, I want you to take your hand and make a circle. Make a circle. Thank you, Taha. You got it there. Got it, Kevin. Good. Now take that circle and press it against your cheek. Press it against your cheek. Press it against your cheek. There you go, Sammy. Your cheek, Shariah. Your cheek. Yes. Okay. So even though I said I'm going to show you the power of body language, you all did, mostly all did exactly what I did rather than what I said. Now, it's a fun game. You can play it on people who haven't been here, but what it emphasizes is people are still trying. What it emphasizes is that our body language has a lot more power than we realized. And you want to be thoughtful about that power. That's why on Zoom, the big tip that I have for you on Zoom, now, admittedly, you've all been in probably more Zoom classes than I have at this point in time, but I need to adjust my screen one more time so I can see everybody. You need to know exactly where your camera lens is. If you are speaking up in class, but you're looking down at your keyboard or over at your notes, or you're looking at the image of Sammy on screen, rather than looking at the actual camera lens, you're not making eye contact with us. Now, I do this for a living and I keep forgetting. So I keep right next to my camera lens a little googly eye. And that reminds me that I want to look up and in between the two eyes when I'm speaking. And so you want to be thoughtful. You probably aren't going to, I've got a raised desk, so I can actually move a little bit. I can use gestures a bit more. For the most part, you can't do that. So your only body language is your facial expression and your eye contact. And you want to make the most of that which you have available. Now, one big warning about all of this is that, oh, so here's the actual statistics about body language. 7% of our impact with an audience are the words we say. 38% is the way we use our voice, the vocal quality, but more than half, 55% of our impact with an audience is in our body language. Now, one big warning about this, even the professor at UCLA, Merabian, who did this research, he said, don't pay attention to this as the absolute truth. He wanted to show that when what we say is different than what we do, people are going to believe what we do. And so he was talking about the power of our body language when there is a disconnect between our words and our vocal quality and our body language. People will stop paying attention to the words. They'll pay attention to how you said them and what you were doing while you said it. For example, I get to the end of a class and I say, are there any questions? Now, I crossed my arms and moved away from you, and that kind of said, I don't want to hear your questions, as opposed to, are there any questions? Like that little bit of body language, you will read the body language more than the words that were coming out of my mouth at that moment. Okay. So we talked about the first three items I wanted to share with you are very much about communication. I want you to approach it with mastery, get better and better every time you write, every time you speak. Take aim, know who is your audience, what's your intent, and what is your message, and then be thoughtful about the verbal, the vocal, and the visual. You've got to do all three, so you want to make sure all three are aligned. Now I want to shift a little bit outside of communications and talk more generally. Since Amrita said I could talk about whatever I want to, I just want to share some things that I would have loved to have known in high school. So first and foremost, don't go it alone. High school and college can be really rough times. And the saddest moment I have as a parent, I have a 22-year-old son, as well as a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. And as a teacher is when I see somebody struggling and not asking for help. At Stanford, my office hours were quite often empty. And I hated that I had cleared my schedule and I was available and students wouldn't come to me. Take advantage of the help that's out there. If it's at a minor level, you just need help getting through a class or help adjusting to a culture, rely on an RA or a coach or a parent or a teacher. Ask for what you need. Do not feel that you need to go it alone. And if the issue gets more serious, if you're struggling with any sort of issues like depression or anxiety or any sort of eating disorder or addiction, anything that even if you've just got inklings of something that could become a bigger problem later on, ask for help. If you don't feel comfortable asking for help, in the slides that I send out, I'll include, there's a great text line, crisis text line, 741-741. If you just want to text with somebody and get some input and get some advice, or there's a ton of toll-free numbers that you can call, different ones in different states. But the important thing is, don't go it alone. If you need some help, if you're struggling with something, ask rather than letting a problem get deeper and deeper and deeper to where it's more than you can manage. I have a TED Talk out there that I encourage you to watch if you've got 4 more minutes at some point in time. But I myself, in graduate school, struggled with depression and suicide. 17 years ago, I made the mistake of nearly ending my life. And it would have sucked if I didn't get to this side of my life, which is living beyond my wildest dreams, getting to have talks like this with high school students and college students, getting to teach at a place like Stanford, having 3 kids and a husband who I just adore. None of that was possible in the summer of 2003 when I tried to end my life. And I wasn't smart enough to recognize I needed to ask for help. So number 4, don't feel like you've got to go this alone. Ask somebody for help, that you can move past something and move on to something else. And then finally, let your dreams frighten you. Now, this sounds weird coming from a parent who every night my 5-year-old crawls into bed somewhere between 2 and 4 in the morning. You know, I'm like, oh, Roma, really, just spend the whole night in your own bed one time. If your dreams are not frightening you, they may not be big enough. If your dreams aren't frightening you, they may not be big enough. And so whatever those dreams are, be even bolder, be even a little bit bigger in that regard. As an adult, I also look at, are my dreams big enough? As I shared, I've been at Stanford for 13 years. I completed that, left, and transitioned all of the duties that I was doing on to other people. And I'm now at a point where I'm figuring out what I want to do next. What's the next thing that I want to do? My biggest dream, I'd love to work in federal government. I would love to work for the current administration, departments or one of the agencies. And so Christmas Eve, I sent my cover letter and my resume to, at that point, President Biden and President-elect Biden and the Biden-Harris transition team. I haven't heard back from them. I haven't waited just to hear from them. I've gone ahead and applied at several other nonprofits and several other places, but I'm still willing to have bold dreams that scare me. And so don't be afraid. If your dreams frighten you, it's okay. And if your dreams aren't frightening you, maybe dream a little bit bigger. Push yourself a little bit more. And as we look at dreams, again, everything in life you can use this mastery approach for. You just want to get better and better each time you do it. I used this yesterday with a group of leaders, and somebody mentioned that that's how they approached learning how to play classical piano, is they just got better and better each time they did it. And somebody said, oh, I had the same experience, but it's with my golf game. I get better and better each time. That's what we mean by approaching life with mastery. And so I'm coming right to the end. You asked me to end by 2:35. I've got 2:25 on my watch. So I am glad to answer questions that anybody has. Either you can unmute and ask the question. We've got 10 minutes until my time is completely over. Or you can drop the message in the chat. If you would prefer to reach out to me directly, let me make that larger so everybody can see it, especially if you're doing this conference on your phone. I don't know how you would do that, but feel free. I'm not as great on Twitter, better on LinkedIn, much better on email, but feel free to reach out to me, jd@jdschramm.com. If you go to my website, there's also a way to just click on a contact link, and that's how Armita and I first connected with one another. So with that, are there any questions I can answer while we still have time together here as a group? And just feel free to unmute and ask.
Sorry.
Rania?
No, you go.
No, you do. Just go for it. I'm passing after you.
Okay. Thank you for all of that. That was really great. I was wondering, do you have any tips of like skills and activities that we can do to improve our communication skills?
A great question. Improv is fantastic, and it's a fun way to get more confident, more at ease. If your school or college has an improv troupe or an improv group that you can be a part of, that's great to do. I used to be a high school debate and forensics coach, so I love competitive speech and competitive activities as well. But if you do something that's non-competitive and easy to get into, I think improv is a great way to do that. At a little more professional level, I encourage you, wherever possible, film yourself and evaluate the film. be able to look at, it's so hard to look at ourselves on screen. In fact, most of the time I coach people to turn off their self view, so you're not looking at yourself all the way through class. It's like, I can't look at myself for 55 minutes. But it is good to watch videos of ourselves and evaluate how well did we speak, and don't set like 15 goals, but what are maybe 2 goals or 3 goals for the next time I do a presentation in class, or the next time that I speak up. So those would be some of the quick tips that I would offer in that regard. Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Rainia.
Okay, so I had like a question. I think that it would be helpful for every high school senior or like a high schooler, but I was wondering, what are the tips that you would you wish you had known before going to college, or like what are the things that you wish you did differently in college? Yeah.
Awesome. Two thoughts come to mind, and I may think of more as other questions come up. One, don't try to do everything. I was a B student in high school and in college because I could have been an A student, but because I spread myself so thin. I was, captain of the debate team, and I was editor of the school paper, and I was an Eagle Scout, and I was active in my church. And so I was trying to do too many things at age 15, 16, 17, that when I did apply to college, I looked like I had no focus. And had I just limited myself to fewer activities and done better with them and had more space, that's what it took me much later in life to learn. I didn't learn it in high school or college. By the time I got to grad school, and certainly by the time I worked on my doctorate, I had developed that focus. But don't try to do everything. Try to limit and do things that matter. The second piece of that is advice that I got when I went away to college. It's so funny because my sister's the one who told me this, and she doesn't remember giving me the advice. But she said, JD, choose your friends carefully, then stick by them fervently. And I liked that advice. Like, be thoughtful about who you choose to allow into your inner circle and connect with. But once you've done that, then be a very loyal friend in that regard. And I appreciated that advice that I got from her. Thanks for that question. What else?
Hello. First off, thank you so much for this amazing presentation. It really helped a lot. My question for you is, you've mentioned earlier, letting our dreams frighten us. So, like, I do have really big dreams, and I kind of think that they're impossible. What if I'm afraid that they can't be guaranteed, or what if I regret not going through another path instead in the future? Thank you.
Thank you. And do I pronounce your name Whistle? Weasel?
Whistle.
Whistle. Apologies. Yeah. Whistle.
No worries.
There's kind of 2 parts to that question. One, it's okay that you not accomplish the dreams that you set out for. And it's corny, but one of the phrases that I think of is, if you shoot for the moon and miss, you still land among the stars. And so if like for me, yeah, I would love to work in federal government for the new administration. Even if I don't get that, I may work at the state level or at the local level. I may work in a nonprofit that's doing remarkable work inside of some of the issues that are important to me. And so having a big dream may propel you to something else that still is farther than where you would have gotten. And with that, be careful about who you share your big dreams with. You want to have a couple people that are close to you, intimate with you, that you can be completely authentic and let them know what you're committed to, but that may not be something you share with everyone. I actually didn't know in preparing for today's talk that I would tell you that I had applied to Biden-Harris, but it just fit in that moment, and I trusted the group that I was speaking to. But I don't share that with everyone. I'm strategic about who I let know about my dreams, because I don't want to tell people who are going to ridicule my dreams or sabotage me towards reaching them. And so be thoughtful about who you share them with. The second part of your question was, I'm sorry, I forget the second part of your question.
I think it was, what if I was afraid of regret after not reaching what I wanted to?
Exactly. There is a, thank you. That was exactly what I needed. There is a sense that, and for those of you who aren't on video, I have my hands and I'm just making them smaller and smaller. There is a sense that as I make choices, that I'm closing off other choices. Sometimes that's true. If you want to go to a military academy, one of like West Point or Annapolis or the Air Force Academy, you need to make that decision at 14 or 15. You can't make that decision at 25. It's too late. And so by not applying to the service academies, I have eliminated that choice from the menu of choices that are out there. So there are times that choosing one thing will eliminate the other choices, was all. And so you want to be thoughtful about some of those major junctures like that. But even when we narrow the focus, narrow the field of what remains in front of us, the choices that are left are usually richer and more nuanced than we realized. And so let me take it out of the service academy. If I choose not to do the pre-med coursework as an undergrad, doesn't mean I can never, ever, ever become a doctor, but I certainly have made it harder for myself because I'm at some point going to have to do all the basic sciences to take the MCAT to get to med school. And so as you make some of those choices, you just are going to have to let some things go. That point of absolute certainty may never come, but it is okay to let go of some choices so that you can be more focused as you pursue the others. And know that many things can still come back around. I didn't become a parent in my 20s or 30s as most people do. I was 51 when we adopted our first child. And so that I was the age of most people's grandparents, and I was becoming a parent for the first time. So some things you can come back around to, and some choices, once you let them go, you do have to let them go. And then move on. Other questions?
I have a question.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Wazal. Yes, final question. Whoever spoke up, I heard a man's voice.
I have a question. So first off, thank you for your amazing keynote, and you have inspired everyone in the Zoom meet. But who inspires you and keeps you going?
Oh, that's a great one to end on. Who inspires me and keeps me going? Generally speaking, at a very broad level, I'm really inspired by young people. I'm inspired by what I've seen in the anti-gun violence movement. What I've seen in the there's some people in their teens who are doing remarkable stuff on climate and environment issues that are 20 or 30, 40 years younger than I am, and that really does inspire me. At an individual level, the person that just keeps coming to mind for me is Adam Grant. He's a professor at Wharton. He's an author. He's a podcaster. I think his approach as a communicator and as a leader, I love his style, and I always learn from him. And I particularly learn when he admits his mistakes. And so that's been really helpful to me. Oh my gosh, I am just realizing there were a few questions in the chat that I didn't get to. Tell you what, I don't want to throw off the schedule, but Amrita, is it okay, or Armita, I keep mixing that up. Armita, is it okay if I stay online and answer the questions via chat while you go on to the next part of the convention?
So we actually have till 5:45, so you can continue for now.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. What is your advice for law students during university years? It's my second semester. I'm thinking of switching majors, but I have a fear regretting that I'll choose the wrong path. Okay, some of your parents may hate me for what's about to come out of my mouth. I think it is incredibly valuable, especially inside of COVID, to do a gap year or to take a space within your degree, but come back and finish it. Don't go away and then never, ever, ever come back. I find that students who've had a moment to reflect, who've had some time to think about, one of my nephews, he started off at a huge state institution. He was at LSU, hated it after one semester, transferred to a smaller private school, Loyola in New Orleans, and had a much better college career. And so you can't do a lot of that. You can't change your major 5 times, but you can change it once or twice. You can take a break, or you can drop a class and take the withdrew passing, withdrew failing, whatever your school has. You can do some of that as a way to make better decisions. It just can't become your pattern to keep doing that. Also, whatever your undergraduate degree is, it is very likely that the career you end up in will be unrelated to the undergraduate degree. And so oftentimes it really does nowadays become either what your master's is or what you have learned professionally. My sister has a degree in graphic design. She works in human resources. My other sister has a degree in theater and a degree in recreation. And for a while, she was a high school speech and phys ed teacher and coach. And then she went into the military and had a 30-year career as a woman officer in the military. So even what you graduate with may ultimately not be the field that you work in. I love some of the answers you all are giving each other as well. That is great. Feel like my current mindset has thrown off my life. I let myself mold to my own and my parents' expectations. I feel like it's a really toxic mindset. How do I change it into a better mindset? You know, it is, first of all, thanks for expressing that the way you did. There's probably other people who feel that way and didn't know how to say it or chose not to say it. How we think is how we are. So our thoughts very much can create our existence. And so if I think I can't do it, if I think I'm not pretty enough, or I'm not smart enough, or I didn't go to the right school, or I don't have the right skin color, any of those thoughts I have that are that don't move me forward, that are negative thoughts, that are limiting beliefs, that's the word I was looking for. If you take on a limiting belief, whether it's your own or your parents or a group of friends, and say that you can't do something, you are giving that life and you're giving that energy. So the way we change our mindset is literally to change that self-talk. We change from saying, I can't do this, to I can't do this yet, or I want to do this, or I will do this. I mean, I don't play piano, so I can't just say, I'm a pianist, you know, but I can say, I will take piano lessons. And so you will have to probably start small, and you will have to look at, particularly while you're still living at home, some of those family patterns, some of those parental patterns are just going to need to be a part of the culture that you live in. But as you move to college and as you ultimately graduate and move on from that, you get to be less of where you came from and more of where you want to go to. And so you were able to do it, but you may need to do it in small steps. I mentioned a moment ago Adam Grant and his new book. Oh, I just had it here. There it is. His new book, Think Again, is that's reversed, isn't it, for you guys? Anyway, I'll put it in the chat. Think Again is a great book around what do I let my thinking do to my behavior. Okay, I'm going to take the very last question, is the last one that I see up there. How can we get rid of the embarrassment that we feel when we give a presentation? How can we shut down those thoughts and nail the presentation confidently? Two thoughts in one book. The two thoughts are, again, envision success. Public speaking is the one place that your audience really wants to see you do well. And so everybody, it is a common thing to be afraid of public speaking, afraid of messing up. And so when you experience that fear, just recognize many people out in the audience have that as well. And so their expectations are they want to see you win, they don't want to see you fail. So think that through. So that's the first thought, is it's natural, it's okay, and envision success. Secondly, approach it with mastery. Yeah, the keynote talk that I gave 10 years ago is not as good as the one that I'm giving right now. The keynote talk I'm going to do next month hopefully will be even better, especially if it's a group of high school students, than what I'm delivering here. And so acknowledge the gain between where you used to be and where you are now, rather than keeping your eye on the gap between where you are and where you would love to be at some point in time. And that embarrassment that you may feel, that embarrassment that you may feel, it's all what you feel on the inside. We don't know it unless you choose to share it with us. And you don't need to share it. You don't need to tell us that you're that nervous or you're that anxious or you're that embarrassed. So two thoughts, one book. I will put this in the chat as well. Speaking Up Without Freaking Out is the book, and it's a $10 book written by a friend of mine. Speaking Up Without Freaking Out by Matt Abrahams is the book that I would recommend on anxiety. It's $10, really worth doing. Think Again by Adam Grant is the one that I mentioned. And if you want to check my book, not a demand that you do it, but Communicate with Mastery. And you can find out more. Just go to my website, jdschramm.com, and there's free copies, 3 samples from the book, and videos up there, that sort of thing. Armita, thank you for bringing me in to the EmpowerEcon spring camp. I had a total blast, and I hope day 2 goes as well as it appears day 1 went. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. The presentation was amazing, and you answered all the questions really thoroughly. So thank you so much for that.
Absolutely. If anything else shows up, feel free to ping me an email. Take care.
Bye. Okay, guys, so I'm sure everyone was really inspired by that, and it was an amazing presentation. And right now we're about to move on to our second guest speaker for the day. So you're going to hear now from our second guest speaker who's about to join us. So our next guest speaker is Tim Ranzetta, and Tim Ranzetta is the co-founder of an educational nonprofit organization called Next Gen Personal Finance. So you can get started.
Of course, I would do well if I unmuted myself. This is impressive, Armita. How many folks you got here?
We have about 68 right now.
Oh, that is awesome. Hey, hats off to all of you for being here and being interested in wanting to learn more about money. Armida, how can I help? How can I help you guys today? What's the best format? You've done a couple of sessions. I'm take questions. I'm happy to talk a little bit about NGPF. What's going to work best?
I think it'd be great if you started off with talking about your organization and then the audience can ask questions.
Sure. So my name is Tim Ranzetta. I am the co-founder of an organization, and I'll put the link in the chat, Next Gen Personal Finance. And yeah, we're a nonprofit. In my previous lives, I was an entrepreneur in private sector businesses, and then decided about 7 years to kind of dedicate the rest of my career to ensuring that you are the next generation, that each of you get an opportunity to learn personal finance in schools. So the situation in the US today is about 1 in 5 students takes a personal finance course in high school. And yet, if I talk to your parents or guardians and told them about this course, they'd say one of two things. They'd either say, that's a class I wish I had, or they would say, would you please help teach my child, because we don't like talking about money in our house, because that's the reality of it all. And so what we're trying to accomplish here is by the year 2030, we say Mission 2030, by the year 2030, every kid should have a personal finance course. And so we don't just talk about it, we actually are doing things to move towards that goal. So what do we do? If you go to our website, you'll see we have curriculum. So we generally work with teachers. We have about 43,000 teachers in the US who reach about 70% of the student population. And we give them resources. We give them lessons. So the way we structure lessons is, think of playlists. We have articles, we have videos, we have simulations, we have games. We know you love to learn by doing and not sitting here and listening to people like me lecture. So that's kind of the way we structure the lessons. And so we have an arcade as 9 games, because we know kids love learning with games. So that's the curriculum side. We also spend a lot of time training teachers, because this is a tough subject to teach. The world of personal finance is constantly changing. And so that's kind of the second thing that we do. So since March of last year, we moved all of our training online. We've trained 6,000 teachers, all 50 states. They've attended on average about 20 hours of our professional development. So that's the second piece. The third piece is advocacy. Like, we want to close the gap. We don't want, I go to sleep every night thinking there's 4 out of 5 kids who aren't learning this stuff. And what happens is, if you don't learn it, you're gonna learn it through the school of hard knocks. You're gonna pay bank fees. You're gonna have low credit scores. You might borrow too much for college. There's all sorts of pitfalls and traps that you can fall into. And that's what really motivates me, is to ensure that we can kind of prevent that from happening. And I think some of the best advocates we see are you. If this is a subject you want, go to your teacher, go to your principal, stand in front of the board, the school boards, and say, this is the most important class that I'm not getting in high school today. Because none of you will walk out of a class that's taught well for personal finance and say, how am I going to use this for the rest of my life? I mean, every one of you need to learn how to manage money. So the only place we can reach all kids is schools. And so we found students who've surveyed the student body to ask the question, do you want a personal finance class? And what subjects would you like to see covered? Because teachers will listen, principals will listen. You can help overcome a lot of the obstacles that us adults have, where, no, we just like things the way they are. Inertia is a really powerful force. Let's not change anything. So everything we do is free. So I've invested in the organization so that we can always offer the training we give teachers, as well as the professional, the training we give teachers, as well as the curriculum. So again, the numbers are about 1 in 5 students across the country get personal finance. From an equity perspective, when you look at schools serving students, Black and brown students, the number is about 1 in 14. That's unacceptable. Like, we need to change that. So that's kind of who I am, what I'm up to. I love the idea. I love the concept of being able to take all the skills that I've learned in business and be able to apply them to try and solve a social problem. So that's kind of what gets me fired up every day. I'm tired of talking. What do you guys want to learn about? What do you want to hear?
Hi, thank you for that. I was wondering, as a young person, how would you suggest that we get people to take us more seriously when we're like also fighting for like these sort of causes and things like that? How would you suggest like we interact with like professionals and others to make them?
Yeah, that's a great question. Can you help me with your first name?
Ibukan.
Ibukan, that's a beautiful name. I love that.
Thank you.
I think for people to take you serious, it's do your research. Like come into a meeting. Let's say you have to figure out who the decision makers are. Is it the principal? Is it the board? And do your research. Yeah, so you kind of know. So what are they going to ask you? They're going to say, well, I hear personal finance doesn't work. Oh, let me show you 3 research studies that prove that. If you go to our website, we have an entire part of our website dedicated to advocacy. So, be ready for those objections that are going to come. Or, geez, the schedule is really packed. I don't see how we can fit it in. Well, you know what? There's 1,400 schools in the United States where they've managed to do this. Like, I think if we really put our heads together, we can find a way to do it. I'm not sure students really want this. Oh, I've just completed a survey and 93% of kids said they want it. And in fact, here's the courses that they want. Oh, it's going to cost too much money. Oh, let me show you this website, NGPF. They're the number 1 provider in the US of financial education. It's free. So, I bet we can find a teacher in the school that would like to teach this as an elective. So I think you have to start, you have to anticipate the hurdles and have solutions, to every one of those. Because if they ask the teachers, there's going to be a teacher who wants to teach this subject, because there is no other subject in the high school where the teacher who teaches this well will actually be better off themselves financially. The number of teachers who we have provided investing education to, who say, you have given me the confidence to go out and open an IRA, or you've given me the confidence for the first time ever, I'm investing in the stock market in index funds or target date funds, which are a specific type of mutual fund. There's no other subject, like they get fired up about teaching this. So I think it's coming in with a game plan. I encourage folks to go to our website, the advocacy section. If you stood in front of a board or you stood in front of a principal with a slide deck, which kind of methodically took them through, I think the other thing you have to be ready for is you got to be ready for those objections. And so mass the army in your school. Don't just make it yourself, make it 4 or 5 other students. Convince a teacher to be part of your group. I think the more you can create a coalition around this, it's a lot more difficult for them to just say no if you've built that up. So it's work. It's definitely hard work, but boy, talk about leaving a legacy behind at the school you're at, where you were the one who kind of made this happen. And we hear it, we hear it all the time about students who've made this change happen. Is it easy? No. Are they definitely going to say yes? No. But boy, it's worth a fight.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, I'm scrolling through some questions here. So our website is designed for teachers, but you can go there. It's accessible. Pretty much almost all sections of the website are accessible for anybody. So you might start at the arcade. If you're getting ready to go to college, we have a game called Payback. And you go through the game. It basically teaches you, you're the decision maker. You go through and play the game, and you're trying to survive to get to and through college while balancing things like student debt, but also your happiness, your connections, your focus at the same time. So I think it teaches you how to manage trade-offs. So there's clearly parts of the website, You find activities that you want to do, you can do them. So we want it to be accessible to all. Core part of finance that you believe is necessary for all students to know. I'll give you 3 things. So I think number 1, and those of you who have your cameras on, I'd love for you to put your thumbs up if you've been introduced to this concept. I think number 1 is a concept called compound interest. Have you guys heard about, oh, look at this. This is a shark group. I think that is number 1. Yeah, and those of you who don't have, if you can, yeah, that's number 1, because you have something I don't have. You've got a lot more years to compound ahead of you. But when you look at those charts, right, if you're mathematically inclined, you know about exponential functions, and the sooner you can get on that curve and start investing, the better. So I think compound interest is number 1. I think number 2 is, and I was in my early 20s, I was no different. Like this idea that investing is get rich quick. Like, unfortunately, the best investing is really boring, and the way to get rich is to get rich slowly. And so if there's one, people often ask me like, okay, so what's a good first investment for me? And the typical inclination for young people is I want to invest in something I know. Oh, I know a lot about Tesla, so I'm going to go buy some stock in Tesla. I know a lot about Amazon, so I'm going to go buy stock in Amazon. And I think that's okay, right? You want to learn about the market, you identify with individual companies, you can do that. I would also say if that's the road you want to go down, whatever you put into that investment, put half into what's called an index fund. And so an index, thumbs up if you've heard about index funds. Well, you guys are good. All right. You must have had, Armida, you must have some great speakers before me, or you all must, maybe you're getting personal finance, but yeah, there's a website I love for those of you who are like, what is an index fund? What are you talking about? I put in the chat a website called FinViz, and it's a great visualization because it basically, when you get to FinViz and look at the chart there, it's basically an example of an index. That index is the S&P 500. So those of you in the US, Standard & Poor's 500, S&P 500, it's 500 of the largest companies in the US. And so you can invest in an index, the S&P 500, and own basically the US economy. It's about 80% of the overall stock market value is in those 500 companies. So when someone's bragging about I own Tesla, well, guess what? If you own the S&P 500, you own Tesla. Or they say Facebook's a real great company. Okay, I own Facebook too. Apple, wow, that's a great company. I own Apple too. But it's diversified. You're not putting all your eggs in one basket and betting on a company. You're betting on the US economy, because the rate of technology, the rate of disruption in the economy is accelerating. And so the company that was great 20 years ago, there's a company called General Electric. It was one of the most valuable companies in the US 20 years ago. It was respected as an incredibly well-run company. They got booted out of the Dow Jones Industrial, and now they're a fraction of their former self. But because I own an index, I don't care, because all these other companies have kind of driven those indexes higher. So, so compound interest, investing, I think is the second thing. And then there's a great book actually I'm reading now called The Psychology of Money. Those of you who can't put yourself to read a finance book, this is a really good book because it's about storytelling, and he takes these stories that are very memorable, and then he ties in some financial concepts. And I think it'd be a good book for. I'm going to send it to all my nieces and nephews, because the third piece that you have to understand is not financial at all; it's psychology. So just 2 very simple examples. Keeping up with the Joneses, right? Are you somebody who's on Instagram, on social media, and you're looking to see what people are buying, what people are raving about? Like, there's a phenomenon, obviously, you've probably heard, keeping up with the Joneses, right? Like, used to be the Joneses were in your neighborhood. Now, because that's all you saw, right? You saw people around you. You saw people in your school community. They had nice shoes. They had nice clothes. You wanted to be like them. Well, now, with social media, and you guys are digital natives, you know about this, like the world, you're seeing celebrities, you're seeing like this idea of like, oh, I gotta keep up with somebody else. Really dangerous, right? Because it just leads you, we're in a consumption economy. It just leads you to want to spend. So I think figuring out your relationship with money, because there are stories you tell, there are scripts that play in your head, some of which are good, but some are that are going to hold you back. And so being thoughtful about that. And you're young, so a lot of what you've learned about money has come from your household or come from your peer group. And so taking some time to think about, okay, what are some of the pitfalls I can fall into because of these stories and scripts that play in my head. So a very long-winded answer for the three things: compound interest, investing, and behavioral finance. Because again, I think knowledge is not enough in this game. Knowledge is not. Oh, I'll just say one other thing, which I think is really important. We talk a lot about goals. I think habits are really important. Because goals without habits, you're not going to get there. And think about the things you do on a daily basis that impact. Maybe it's I buy coffee, and I think the whole invest your latte is way overdone. Like, what, if you enjoy coffee, spend $3 or $4 on a cup of coffee, darn it. Like, that's not going to be the thing that changes your life. But yeah, I think just being thoughtful about that. All right, looks like you played Payback at the last event. I love that. Okay, what financial advice would you give to your 18-year-old self? Folks, the world was different when I was 18. I grew up in a family of 6 kids. Neither one of my parents went to college. We were firmly, squarely in the middle class. But when you have 6 kids, I don't feel like we ever lacked for anything, but I was the 5th child. So I had 2 older brothers, 2 older sisters, and my parents said, at a young age, you're going to go to college, but we're not going to pay for it because we can't pay 6 on a middle class income. But the thing that was different back then, folks, is college didn't cost as much as it did. So I lived in New Jersey, but I went to college in Virginia. It was a state college, but I never paid more than 10 grand. So entire college education, $40,000. And so I had started working when I was, so the advice for a 14-year-old as well as an 18-year-old is get a job. I think the value of work, you will understand, you'll understand the value of money if you work for it. Right. And I think one of the unfortunate things, I started working when I was 7, right? My neighbor broke her hip. I had to walk her dog. She paid me $5 a week. Took her about a year to recover. I think I had $250 in the bank when I was 7 years old. And I was a saver. That was kind of a habit that was ingrained in me. I turned 12, I had a newspaper out. Turned 14, I was a golf caddy. So basically I paid my way through college through working 8 summers as a golf caddy. So, you go up to a golf course, you walk 5 hours with business people carrying their golf bags, and you hope they give you a good tip. But I pretty much, when I was 18 starting college, I had $20,000 in the bank. But I needed it because I needed to pay for college. So I think I'd probably say to my 18-year-old self, enjoy life a little bit more, because I was just a grinder. Between school, academics, I was played sports and work. I didn't smell the roses, but I feel like that lesson set me up well for life. I think no matter what job you get, maybe, the job you're working at a fast food restaurant, you're a cashier. I mean, there's limits, right, to what an 18-year-old can get. Just always do more in that job. Just never do the minimum. Be the kid who shows up 10 minutes early. Be the kid who asks the manager questions about how they run their business. Be that curious kid, because I think in any job, there's something to learn. But if you just take it as my job is, well, these are the 5 things they want me to do, and that's it. No, and the fact just you all are here makes me believe that none of you are like that. But I think you want to stand out no matter where. you are. Maybe you're going to get a raise sooner than somebody else. Maybe they're going to give you more responsibility. But this, the young person who puts in that extra effort, the young person who can communicate effectively, both verbally as well as in writing, I'll tell you, there are many, many emails I get from folks that lack kind of that basic grammar. And so you want to stand out as those little things that adults notice. One last thing I would say is, believe it or not, older people really want to help the younger generation. So if you have your heart set on a career, you're interested in a type of business, don't be shy about reaching out to folks and saying, hey, I'd love to have I'm interested in XYZ. This is what you do. I'd love to have a conversation. And again, do your research ahead of time so you're asking them good questions. We call it informational interviews. And find people who have a natural affinity, natural connection to you. So maybe it's an alum from your high school. When you get to college, the college alumni network is really strong. And you would be surprised. Now, you're not going to get Mark Cuban to respond. Like, he's probably going to be, difficult to reach. But you'll find that a lot of people, and as an 18-year-old kid, I was shy. I could not imagine having a conversation with an adult about business. But I chose a major in college because I really didn't understand. I chose a major that I ended up switching out of one semester later because I was shy, because I didn't know what a chemical engineer did. And when the academics got tough, I jumped ship because I didn't have that motivation to say, you know what, I see where studying this subject is going to lead me, and I really want to do this. I was following this path that my older brother had led, my older brother who I looked up to. And so that's another key message, I think, is like, make sure you're living your life and not somebody else's dream for your life. Because I didn't know, I looked up to him, I admired him, I thought, okay, he's a chemical engineer, I'm good in science and math, that's something I ought to do, but it wasn't mine. And that was the most liberating moment in my life, when I walked into the dean's office at the engineering school and said, I want out. I want to go choose my own path. It's frightening, it's scary, because you don't know where that path's going to lead, but you want to make sure you're living your life and not somebody else's. Yeah, so learning about investing from square one. I think there's some great websites to read. If I had to kind of suggest a couple of books, there's a fellow by the name of Jack Bogle, Bogle. He was the founder of a large investment firm called Vanguard. I think he writes in kind of a very simple way about some of the basics of investing. Burton Malkiel wrote a book. And I had him on my podcast. He wrote a book back in the 70s that kind of just, there's a belief in the investing world that these investment managers can do better than just, can do better than the market. And what Burton Malkiel said in 1970, and now the data is overwhelming, is that you're much better off investing in an index fund than investing in a mutual fund or a hedge fund where they're trying to beat the market, because the market is pretty darn efficient. And so it's really hard over the long run for them to do better. And the other thing is they're going to charge you higher fees. That's one of the reasons somebody who's investing to beat the market doesn't beat the market, is because they have fees. Their fees are much higher. They got to go hire analysts. They have to have expensive office space. So it's, even if they beat the market, after fees, they typically don't beat the market. So he was ahead of his time, Burton Malkiel. And of course, I'm forgetting his name, the book that he wrote, but I will have that to you shortly. He's a professor at Princeton. I did a podcast with him. And gosh, I hope I'm that sentient when I am 80. I think he's like 85. So I'll find the title to that book. Yeah, I think the other thing is, I mean, Armita's got a book, right? Armita, you've written a book. I think I'm having a conversation with somebody in North Carolina who wrote a book. I think, yeah, the more you can read books written by your peers, because too much of the mainstream financial books out there are not written for kids. They are written, and the problem with finance and investing is there's too much darn jargon. And so they intimidate you. They make you think it's so difficult that you can't do it. You got to hire somebody else to do it. And it's great to see all the young women here too, because I think we got to blow up this gender gap in finance. You know, I hear it from too many teachers that too many young women don't think finance or don't think money, or they're intimidated by it. And when it comes to investing, I will tell you that women are much better equipped to be good investors than men, because men will take risks. Men will be overconfident. And those are not good traits to have as an investor. And so I wish we talked more about the assets that women have in terms of their disposition and personality when it comes to investing. All right. I'm just cycling through. Yeah, what apps would be used for investing? So I normally don't give opinions about apps, but I'll give you an opinion about one of them, which is a very popular one today, which is Robinhood. I would just say beware. So here's why. So the best engineers in the world, or the best engineers, at least in the United States, come to Silicon Valley to go work for companies like Robinhood. Why? Is it because they want to democratize investing, or is it because they want to build an app that has addictive properties to it? And so Robinhood, with all the allure of free trading, right? The one good thing Robinhood has done, frankly, is other firms have had to copy them. And so you can now buy and sell a stock at no cost. It used to be you'd have to pay $5 to buy a stock, $5 to sell a stock. And so that would limit your trading a little bit, because nobody wants to pay $10 for a stock. And so basically all the big brokerage houses now offer free stock trading, but Robinhood was the first one to do it. So what Robinhood has done is create an addictive app, so that you first join Robinhood and you get free stock, up to $500, and you kind of pick a card, you scratch it, and they're like, congratulations, we got confetti going around. You got a free stock. Now let's trade some more. The more you trade, the more you lose, is basic, like day trading. Go to YouTube. There's a lot of YouTube videos. I have a day trading system. You can follow it and you can make a ton of money. Folks, day trading is a losing proposition. Day trading, 75 to 90% of the time, you lose. Like, the thing about investing over the long run, like, it's the best. The longer you invest, the more opportunity you have to make money. The more you day trade and think the game is, I'm going to jump in and out of stocks and make money. You might have some wins early on, but the problem is, over the long run, there aren't day trading systems out there that work. The people who sell that on YouTube, they make money not from day trading. They make money because you pay them $250 for their course. So anyway, so what does Robinhood do? Robinhood wants you to trade frequently, because they get paid for every order they send to somebody else. That's kind of one of their revenue sources. They make money because they convince you that they can double the amount you invest by lending you money. That's called margin trading. So you put up $100, we'll lend you $100. You can buy twice as much stock. The problem is, when those stock prices go down, you're going to get whacked. You lose twice as much. When the market's going up, everybody's a genius and it seems like a great strategy. But when the market turns down, now you've really damaged yourself. The third thing they want you to do is buy options. Options are a very speculative trade. And again, it's like a lottery ticket. It's all or nothing. That's not investing, that's speculating. And so I just think, while it is the thing to do, and maybe you join the subreddit group Wall Street Bets and you go buy GameStop, like, folks, that's not investing. That's speculation. And that's where you lose. But the problem is, we seek excitement. We are influenced by the herd because everybody else is talking about it and I want to be part of it. And that's, again, the psychology piece of it. The psychology piece of it is so critical. So, the surest way to get wealthy is to, it's boring. It's long term. It's buying index funds. And again, if you're like, what do you know? What do you know, Tim? I want to buy individual stocks too. All I would say is please, please, please put some of your money in an index fund just so you can see how that asset behaves, how an index fund behaves versus individual stocks. If individual stocks get you to learn more about the stock market, I think that's a positive. But if it becomes like that's the way I'm going to get wealthy, I think there's some danger there.
Does that make Robinhood a good app or a not so good app?
Yeah, I think it's dangerous. I think it's dangerous for a young investor because I think they have, and thank you for asking that question because I didn't get to the punchline. I think trading often, I think trading options, and I think getting you to borrow money to buy stocks is really dangerous. And that's what their app is encouraging you to do. Why? Because they make more money by having you do each of those three things. And it's very speculative, in terms of like, you can lose all your money. Like most investing, you invest in an index fund because you're buying 500 companies, or some index funds have 3,000 companies. Like you're not going to lose all your money. Like the worst year ever in history, you lost half your money, but then 10 years later, the market was up 400% since that point. So I think get started investing, but the problem with Robinhood is they're going to hook you. You buy a stock on Robinhood and you're going to get text notifications. The stock is up, buy some more. The stock is down, buy some more. Like they have figured out how to create this addictive loop. And so, the three largest brokers out there are Fidelity, Schwab, and Vanguard. Their apps probably aren't that great, but Frank, I don't have a brokerage app on my phone. I do again, I'm a dinosaur, but what it does is it prevents me from acting like you shouldn't think of stocks as I'm going to be impulsive about it. It's like, no, I'm going to buy, I'm going to put my money in there and it's going to be there for the long run. When you have a steady job, it's like, okay, every 2 weeks or every month, I'm going to put new money in the market. So it's called dollar cost averaging, and you just do that over time. But I'll tell you that where we get in trouble as humans is if we put stock tickers on our phone and we're looking at them hundreds of times a day, like you're going to want to act. And usually the best strategy in the market is, set it and forget it. So you're not having to constantly, oh my gosh, it's up 5% today. Oh my gosh, it's down 20%. Because again, psychologically, there's a term called loss aversion. We hate losses about twice as much as we enjoy gains. So when you start losing money, that's painful. So you're going to jump out of the market, and then the market's going to bounce back because that's what the market does. So does that answer your question, Kiki?
Yes, thank you. Sorry, to add on to that, how would you kind of recognize these more scammy services? Like, I know also banks try to put profits over helping sometimes. So how do you kind of recognize when that's going to be less beneficial and stay away from those types of things?
Yeah, and so we create a bunch of activities around. So you got to read the fine print. Yeah, ultimately they count on the fact that you don't know. So let me just give you a great example. You open a bank account. This is in the U.S. If you open a bank account in the U.S., banks are required to get you to opt into a service called Overdraft Protection. So if I were to ask any of you, you don't want to overdraw your account, do you, Allie? You would say, no, I don't. I don't want to overdraw my account. And they would check the box, and now you have overdraft protection. So the problem with the terminology is great. Who puts this together? Clearly the financial service firm. You think overdraft protection, you want that, right? Okay, so here's the scenario. You go and you like to go to Starbucks, you go to, when we can go to the movies again, you go to the movies and you go for dessert after the movie. You make 3 stops on your day and you have overdraft protection, but you don't realize that your account balance is zero. So you go and spend $5 on a coffee, you spend $10 on a movie. I don't know, movies are probably $12.50. Anyway, and then you go for dessert afterwards. 3 different places, 3 different transactions, and you swipe your debit card and it all works. And you're like, oh, this is cool. Like I had fun with my friends. That was a fun night. And then you get the account statement and $35 fee because your account was overdrawn at each of those 3 places. Does the bank send you a warning? Don't spend. No, they want you to do it. That 3 stops cost you $105. Plus, you still have to pay them the money for. So what just happened? It's overdraft protection. Banks make $30 billion a year because people don't manage their checking accounts well. And if you're new, like I think the stats for, 15 to 20-year-olds is $1 billion. Because you chose overdraft protection. Guess what? If you said no to overdraft protection, then when you swiped your debit card, it wouldn't have worked. So it would have been embarrassing. It would have been like, oh, this is bad. Hey, can you cover me today if you're out with a friend? That'd be embarrassing, but it would avoid you paying that fee. And so the banks play these little games with you where they don't say, now, Allie, do you want overdraft protection? And oh, by the way, if you don't have the money in your account, we're going to cover it, but we're going to charge you $35 every time that happens, up to 6 times in a day. So that's just one example, but it's absolutely, it's reading the fine print. If it sounds like, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. I think that's the other, like when your spider senses are tingling and you're like, this seems like a great deal. Like someone just told me if I gave them $100, they'll give me $150 at the end of the month. Like that's a great deal. Yeah, I would say that's the other. Yeah, look for reputable, do your research. Because there are a lot of scams, there's a lot of fraud out there.
I have a quick question, please. So you've talked earlier about colleges. So I'm a 16 years old girl, and I live in a country that it's kind of impossible to like have a job and save money for colleges since I'm planning to study abroad. And colleges are pretty expensive. What do you suggest for me to do in order to save money for college in a situation like this?
Yeah, I think, because I teach 9th graders every summer, and they'll often ask me I don't have a job, I don't have a ton of money to invest, and I say, invest in yourself, be the most outstanding student that you can be, because the way you can earn money is through scholarships. If you are that outstanding student who really puts all of you're like, I can't have a job, I'm just going to put 120% into my schoolwork, because if I am truly outstanding as a student, schools will provide scholarships. I think that's the biggest thing. And then I think, and then this is true for anybody before they go off to college, I really think you should think about it as a 4 or 5 year plan. Where I see young people get in trouble is they fall in love with a school. And I was the same way. You go on a campus, you're like, this is the place for me. This is where I want to go. And I would just ask you to be really cautious about narrowing in that there's only one best school for you. So I have an 18-year-old child who's going off to college, and I would just say that every day. Folks, as much as your parents, your schoolmates, everybody's like the most elite schools, like that's it. If you don't get in, you're not going to be a success. Folks, the great thing about the United States is there's 3,000 colleges in the US, folks. There are hundreds of great schools out there. And school is what you make of it. So I never want people to think there's just this narrow set of schools. And so therefore, I'm going to spend $100,000, I'm going to go into an incredible amount of debt. Because the problem with student debt, folks, don't go away. It doesn't go away. And it's not like, oh, this is a 5-year problem. It's like, no, this problem can persist for a really long, and it's stressful. It's just not not a great situation. So too often people don't want, and it's hard, I'm not going to deny it, like too often people don't want to look at it in a rational way to say, you know what, I really want to go to this school, but for me to go to this school, I'd have to borrow $25,000 a year. And so then I'm going to look at my parents and say, hey, how about it? Like, and it's just, there's too many stories out there. And I hate to see young people struggle because of that. Because the other thing that's happening while you're paying that much back on your student debt is you're not investing in the future, right? All your money in your 20s, when we know compound interest, gosh, the more you can put away and start investing in your 20s versus having to pay off those student loans. So I think kind of being really thoughtful up front, because too often, one of my earlier jobs, I focused on the student debt problem in the US. And I just met too many kids and too many adults who were like, I was really surprised when I graduated that I had $100,000 in student debt. Wait, how'd that happen? So the sooner you can kind of figure out, okay, maybe that's not the best school for it. I'd love to go there, but I can go to the state school for a quarter of the cost. I just, I'd love for more, and it's hard. I'm not going to deny it. It's easy when it comes to the college decision to kind of have really strong feelings about where you want to go. But please, for your parents' sake and for your own sake, take finances into. That's not saying don't apply to a school because it looks like it's really expensive. Because the other thing you should know is about 10% of people pay that sticker price. When you hear that college is $70,000 or $80,000 a year, only about 10% of people are paying full boat. So on average, private colleges are discounting by 50% when it comes to tuition. And I think that shocks a lot of people. So I'm not saying don't apply to your dream school, because maybe you are that outstanding student, you're going to get a great financial aid package. I'm just saying kind of, okay, once you know where the numbers fall out, just really think through that decision.
Hello.
Hello.
I just want to say, I'm Mohammed Mehdi. I'm from Casablanca, Morocco. I'm going to college the next year, I think, or next the 2 years next, and I think of making an engineering major, engineering physics. But I think that making the science or presenting science into finance is really good, and like what Elon Musk has done is with the Tesla or SpaceX. So I don't think if doing a management major or doing an engineering major, I don't know what to choose one.
Yeah, the only thing I'd say there is the more technical the degree, it seems, because it is technical, the supply demand, like you'll be in demand, I think, kind of. But again, don't choose a major based on where you think the job market's going. Choose a major based on where you feel like you're strong. So I think you kind of have to look at the future in terms of, if I get this training, what sort of job will I get? And go shadow people, go watch people who are doing that job to make sure that, oh, you know what? They don't spend as much time talking to people, and I'm a real people person. Maybe, like, if you can make that connection between what you study and what jobs are going to be available to you, and understand what those jobs look like on a day-to-day basis, I think it'll ensure that there's some congruence between, okay, what I'm studying and what I want to become. But also recognize that as a 18, 15, 16, 17-year-old kid, you may not know the answer. Like, so be open to experiences. Use your college years to get internships, to go see what the world of work looks like.
Yeah, thank you. But I think that when you have a when you have management skills, you will be an entrepreneur. But when you have an engineering physics called a major and a management skill, you will be very perfect and making a great company.
Yeah, I think the combination, you see a lot of folks who get their undergraduate degree in engineering and then go to management. You know, go to business school to get some of those management skills. That makes a lot of sense. Yep.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yep.
Merging those two majors and creating a very good stuff are really good. So I think that I'll make a double major.
Yep. No, I think that combination is good. Absolutely. So I'm seeing a lot of questions about, let me see. I was just cryptocurrency. Yeah. So, you know, first of all, I'm a dinosaur, folks. So you probably know a lot more about crypto than I do. What I will tell you is it's, you know, it's incredibly speculative, right? It's had a tremendous run, right? If you go back, I go back a year, I think it was like 10,000. Now it's over 50,000. There are some people who think it's the future. There are other people who think it's a fraud. And the value of cryptocurrency is what somebody else is willing to pay for it. So I don't have any, you know, I think what's really cool about it is, you know, I can go on PayPal and buy $5 worth of crypto and see what happens to it. In terms of like putting your life savings into it and saying, I believe that this is, you know, this is the future, you know, it's kind of risky. What's happened, what's different now, because I wouldn't even look at crypto maybe 4 or 5 years ago. What's changed now is I think the way people think of it, I think of it less as a currency. So in other words, you're not going to go to the 7-Eleven and buy Reese's peanut butter cups and with Bitcoin. I think the way people are thinking about it they're thinking about it as an investment. So you have folks on Wall Street now who are saying, you know what, this might be something like digital gold, you know. So investors turn to gold, they invest in gold when periods of uncertainty. And so I think you're seeing people perceive now Bitcoin as, oh, maybe it's that safe store of value and it's a digital currency. And so I'm going to put 1 or 2% of my net worth into it and see what happens. But again, I'm in no way an expert. I think it's fascinating to watch and to see. But would I put a significant amount of my net worth into it because I believe it's going to go up to 1 million? You know, the problem with an investment like that is that when you invest in a stock or you invest in the stock market, you can collect some income. These companies produce profits. They share some of the profits with investors in things called dividends. When you buy gold, when you buy cryptocurrency, like it's not income producing. It's not producing any income for you, which, you know, is for some folks, it's just, they see that as a negative. Yeah, NFTs are incredible. What's happened there? Those of you not familiar, NFTs, non-fungible tokens. And again, we just did a video. One of the members from my team, Yaneli, just did a video on NFTs, which I can share. Arnita, I'll share with you a bunch of links afterwards. But again, so what you're seeing there is incredible speculation. You know, I have to admit, I don't really get it. So I look at what the NBA is doing, you know, so the National Basketball Association here in the US, where they are taking videos. So I think one of the most popular videos, and it's a video segment of LeBron James, who you know is a great basketball player. They take a video clip, I don't know how long it is, 5, 10, 15 seconds, and they wrap it in this, create a non-fungible token for this video clip, which you and I can go watch, but somehow somebody's willing to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to say, I am the owner of a video showing LeBron James, a highlight of LeBron James dunking over somebody. And it's worth a couple $100,000. And then there's some digital artwork that was done that captured, I don't know, $67 million. Somebody said it was worth. I cannot say I truly understand it, other than it feels like there's a bit of a speculative bubble. when you hear and see stories like that.
Sorry, adding on to that, do you think it's going to be a last-longing effect, or is it something that's just a hype and that will be over soon?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I think there are elements of it that are going to persist. And I think it's the idea of the blockchain. I think this idea that you can create, and I think for artists, this is actually, and again, I don't know what shape it's going to ultimately take, but I think this idea of being able to prove authenticity, which kind of, because of the blockchain, because of the way it's organized, these NFTs give you the confidence that you are the owner of this digital asset. So I think there's some interesting business. I think this is the first inning. And, I think back to the internet bubble, before you guys were born, 99, 2000, like there were a lot of businesses springing up where people are like, that imploded. One example, a company called Webvan. So their big innovations, we're going to deliver groceries to people's homes. Believe it or not, that was revolutionary, folks, 20 years ago. And they failed because they invested a ton of money and consumers didn't change behavior. But that would be a really good business right now had they done it. And so I think it's going to be fascinating to watch to see how these business models evolve. So yes, I think the people who invest early on in some of these speculative things will get wiped out, but there's probably some value to the infrastructure that's being built. So I think that's the interesting thing to watch.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the question about I love the fact that somebody's asking me about return on investment for education, because I think that is a great way to think about it. If you're going to invest that much time, 4 years or 5 years of your life, and that much money, like, let's go see what the payoff is. So the good news is there is now information available where you could look at the institution, the college you're interested in attending, and you could look at the major that you're interested in, and you could see what the post-college earnings are by school, by major. Because it's a question like you would think most people would want to ask, but you also should know that most people change their majors. Not everybody who picks their major ends up sticking with it all the way through, but at least you have a good idea, because tied to that salary you're going to make after you get out of college is like how much student debt is going to be too much. So there's a general rule of thumb, and it's a rule of thumb. So I would take it just at that surface level that, you shouldn't take out more debt than your first year salary. So if you were going to come out of school and be a school teacher and make $35,000, well, you should be really cautious about taking on more than $35,000 in debt. And just the way the math works, it looks like, I don't know, 10% of your pay would be going towards paying off that student debt. So I'm not somebody who says absolutely no student debt, because that money that you're investing in your education is an investment. Like, the reason people go to college is so they can get more skills. So, there's a maturation process, but there's also the reality of you can make a lot more as a college grad than you can make as a high school grad, or you can make a lot more as a college grad than somebody who starts the first year or two of college. So the people who struggle most with college debt, and this is a little known fact, the people who default most, the people who don't make payments on their student debt, are the folks who have balances that are like $5,000 or $10,000. And you would say, why? Like, wait a minute, that doesn't seem really high. I'm reading these stories about people with $100,000 in student debt. Folks, as much as the media loves to report on it, it's not that prevalent. It's the people who have $5,000 or $10,000. Why? Because they don't finish college. So you go a year or two, you have $5,000 or $10,000. You probably had a negative experience, so you dropped out, and then 1 or 2 years of college doesn't give you a premium, doesn't give you a bump in earnings. So now you're stuck with a job that a high school grad would get, which makes it difficult for you to repay that loan. And so, so the rule of thumb about kind of how much student debt you can have, but I'll tell you, the people who graduate, again, you're going to read about the horror stories in the media because they find those individuals, but the most important factor to think about whether you're going to pay back your student debt is whether you get the degree. If you get that degree and you have debt at a manageable level, those are the two most important factors. All right. There's somebody somebody study history. Alan, this is a great question. So this idea of index funds, the Nikkei index in Japan, like it has not gotten back to its previous highs back in the 1980s. Well, a couple things. One is I think Japan was a bigger bubble. I think the bubble we're seeing in the U.S. is in pockets. I think Bitcoin, when an asset goes up 600% in a year, like that's pretty dramatic. When you look at NFTs, when you look at the GameStop example, I think there are many bubbles. I wouldn't say the overall U.S. economy or the U.S. market is way over. I mean, it's on the higher end in terms of valuation, but I don't think it's at the Japan level. I think some individual assets are at bubble levels, and that's what I'd be worried about. So the other way to counteract Alan's point here is don't just invest in your home country. So I think if you're a Japanese investor in the 1980s who only invested in the Nikkei, yeah, that left that was a pretty dramatic pain for you. But if you're a US investor, the encouragement is like invest internationally. So don't just invest in your home country. The US market is about 60% of the overall global market when it comes to stock market valuation. So maybe you should have, most of your assets, if you're US based, in the US indexes, but then also invest in Europe, invest in Asia, invest in fast growing emerging markets. So if you spread your money around, if you diversify, that avoids the situation where you're subject to that one country risk, because that's the only place that you invest. Yeah, I love these questions about freelancing too, because I think your generation is going to be, I think the gig economy is a real thing. And so go to great suggestions here about Fiverr, Upwork, Create Explore, to go see what people are paying for freelance work. What are the skills that they're paying for, and see what matches what your skill set is. Other questions? It looks like we got a King James fan here from Adam. Build up our credit score. That's a great question. So those of you not familiar with what a credit score is. So here in the US, we have credit reporting agencies, and they love distilling stuff down to a number. So your credit score could range from 300 to 850. So what that credit score, and so the number one thing in terms of raising your credit score is make on-time payments. That's kind of the number one factor. You want to raise your credit score. It's making on-time payments. But the reason credit scores are really important is because they're not only used, well, they're important for a couple different reasons. The higher your credit score, the less you're going to pay when you borrow money. So higher credit score means when you go to buy a car, if you have a high credit score, you're going to pay a lower interest rate than somebody who has a very low credit score. But the other problem with credit scores is when you, and this is a real life example for young people, when you're ready to rent an apartment, so you're at college, you want to live off campus, or you finish college or you finish high school, but you need to rent an apartment, what the landlord's going to ask for is, can you give me permission to look at your credit score? So if I have two applicants here, and John has a credit score of 650 and Jane is at 750 or 800, I'm going to make a judgment, and I'm going to take the higher credit score, because that's going to tell me the judgment they're making about you is that is your level of financial responsibility. And oh, by the way, when you get car insurance companies determine your premium based on your credit score. Again, they're making a judgment about your level of responsibility. The other thing that's happened is employers will now look at your credit score, especially if you're handling money. If you're like in an accounting function, they want to know, hey, has Tim been bankrupt before? Because I don't think I want him in my accounting function if he can't manage his own money. So that's kind of another risk there. So how, as a young person, do you start establishing credit? So in the US, it's difficult to get a credit card until you're the age of 21, unless you can get your parents to co-sign. The other thing in the US is they have this thing called authorized user. So if your parents or guardian has a high credit score, you could go to them and ask, could you sign me up as an authorized user on your credit card? And for certain credit card companies, so you should call ahead to make sure this is the case, you in effect inherit the credit score of your parent or guardian. So again, you want to make sure they have a high credit score. You want to make sure the credit card company you're talking to says, yes, we do provide this information to the credit bureau so you can benefit from a high credit score that your parents might have. A good credit card on training wheels, I'd call it, is something called a secured credit card. So what a secured credit card does is basically you put up a deposit, say $300. You put a deposit in an account, they give you a card. And so you start swiping that card, that information goes to the credit bureau, and you've established a credit history. Because one of the other factors is the length of your credit history. So when you're starting out, you start with a low score. You don't start at 850, you start at like 500. And then as you start to make on-time payments, your score goes up. So you do want to establish credit. And so the simplest example I can give you is, let's say you go get a secured credit card. I think Amazon has a secured credit card. I mean, there's a lot of places that have secured credit cards. So you put your $300 deposit, I think that's the minimum, and you go buy one thing a month. You literally buy one thing a month and you pay it off. Let's say it's a cup of coffee, or it's a snack, or it's lunch, but they don't care how much you borrow. All they do is check off that, Tim paid his bill this month. It doesn't say whether the bill was $3 or $300. It says Tim paid his bill this month, check the box, and now I've got a track record. Now I can start establishing credit. But I think that's an important thing. And think of credit scores as escalators on the way up. Takes a while to kind of build a good credit score because they look at credit history, they do look at utilization. So if you have a credit card with a limit of $300, don't borrow up to that limit, because that's, if you borrow $300, your utilization is 100%. They generally want you to be around 30%. But it's an escalator on the way up, and then when you make a mistake, when you miss a payment, it's an elevator on the way down. It drops quickly. So that's why those early mistakes can really cost you, because it takes time to kind of build a good credit score. So you do not need to constantly be in debt with a credit card. So treat your credit card the way you would a debit card. Never, ever, ever borrow money you don't have. So why would you ever use a credit card then? Well, some of them have cash back, right? Credit cards are a good deal when you pay that balance every month. So those of you new with credit cards, you'll get a credit card statement sent to you in the mail, or you'll see it online, and they'll say, let's say I used my credit card and spent $100 on it in the month. And I'll get my statement and they'll say minimum payment $20. Don't ever, ever fall for that. So what they want you to do is they want you to pay $20. They don't want you to pay the full balance. Why do they want you to pay the minimum balance? So they can charge you 20% on what you don't pay them back. So never, ever, ever borrow using a credit card when you don't have the money to pay, because you're going to pay 20% interest. 20% interest, compound interest hurts with debt. It helps when you're investing, it really hurts with debt. So you really want to think about your credit card like a debit card. So you don't always have to be. About half of Americans who have a credit card pay it off every month. The reason credit card companies are some of the most profitable companies in the world is because half the people don't pay it off. every month. And so they're paying 20% interest, whatever, almost 2% every month on that. Oh, Alan is just full of questions here. So the question about bonds. Yeah, bonds are interesting. So, you know, I'll give you my short answer, because bonds are really confusing to a lot of folks. And so a bond is just an IOU. Think of it as a loan that I make. So governments issue bonds. So the US runs a deficit. This year, a very large deficit because of COVID. And so they issue what are called treasury bonds. So I, as an investor, can invest $1,000 in a treasury bond. It's an IOU. I'm loaning money to the government. In return, the government gives me a very small amount of interest. If I lend them money for 10 years, they'll pay me about I don't know, when I last looked, it was about 1.6%. So I give them $1,000, and then every year they pay me $16 for 10 years, and it's fixed. So every 6 months I get a payment. It's $8 after 6 months, another $8. And so I get $16 for 10 years. So that's $160 back. And then at the end of 10 years, they give me the $1,000 back. So that's a bond. That's kind of the way it works. We give you coupon payments over time, and then I get the lump sum back. And the US government debt is generally thought of as being pretty risk-free. If the US government can't pay their debts, they'll just crank up the printing press, so to speak. So bonds are generally considered a safe investment, safer than stocks. Now, the problem with bonds is when interest rates go up, so let's say tomorrow we woke up and interest rates were 4%. I own a bond that's locked in at 1.6%. That's not so good, because now somebody else could go buy a bond that pays 4% interest, right? You'd rather make more interest. In this case, interest is good because the government's paying me interest. And so suddenly the bond I have, which was 1.6%, looks lousy because somebody else can go buy a 4% bond. The value of my bond is actually going to go down in value because nobody's going to pay me what I paid for my bond, because my bond looks lousy because it's such a low interest rate. So the belief is I'll try and keep this as short as possible. There's a lot of pent-up demand in the US, a lot of pent-up demand in other countries, right? We've been locked in our homes. We haven't spent a lot of money. People's savings accounts are starting to grow. The government's making stimulus payments. So there's a thought that interest rates are going to go up, that the economy is going to get red hot for a period of time because tremendous increase in demand, consumer demand, people going on trips, people just going out and about and living their lives again if the vaccine variants don't keep us locked in place again. So the thought is the economy is going to heat up. When the economy heats up, interest rates tend to go up. When interest rates go up, bonds are not great investments. So the thought is so in terms of my own personal portfolio, I own very little in bonds because I do think interest rates are going to go up, and I don't want to lose value on an investment that's supposed to be low risk. So that's a long answer. But if you're young, you don't necessarily, for those of you who are young, you don't necessarily want to own bonds anyway. The recommendation for most young people is you want to have as much equity as possible, which is stocks. You want to own as much stocks and don't necessarily worry about bonds.
Hello?
Yes.
I'm interested in self-publishing, online self-publishing. Would you?
So I think I heard you, Mohammed. Was that self-publishing?
Self-publishing.
So you want to write a book?
No, it's online self-publishing. So on Amazon, on KPA, publish the book, not write it in the future, I think.
Armid is an expert in that, right? You self-published?
I begin learning. So would you give me some advice? You know something about the subject or something like that?
Not really. I mean, I can tell you. So here's a fact I didn't realize. I had the guy who wrote this book on a in class I was teaching, and the average book sells about 1,000 copies. So that's for me, that was
massive.
That was shocking. That the average book,
That's
like
massive.
what's that?
That's massive.
Oh no, I think that's low. I think I was shocked at how low it was. I would have expected the average book to sell thousands of copies.
No,
so
just
that,
it's well, you're a beginner. Just you don't expect a lot
Yeah.
of sales. It's just a beginning.
Yep. No,
When you're
I
a
think
beginner, when you're a beginner, you think just low sales. You think that it's massive, but when you grow, when your investment is growing, you think that this is low. You know.
Yep. Yeah, I don't know a ton about self-publishing. I know if that you want to write a book, it's probably never been easier in terms of finding, finding ways to get it published and get it posted. And as long as your expectations are, you know what, I'm going to love the process of writing a book, and I'm not going to worry about the sales afterwards.
I'm
Sounds good to
interested
me.
in writing a fantastic book, a magic world. That's very interesting.
Yeah, I don't think there's ever been a better time in terms of the opportunities to self-publish.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you so much for answering everyone's questions. We are a bit tight on time, so I think we
Yes.
have to end it here, but thank you so much for like all the thorough answers and everything. I think everyone enjoyed it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Armida. I'll send you a bunch of links to resources also.
Okay, for sure.
Thank you all. You guys ask great questions. And again, I just love the fact, I tell you, this gives me confidence in the next generation when I see all of you so interested in kind of that you are so far ahead of your peers in terms of understanding this, and the questions you asked were awesome. So when you do this again, Armida, I'm always here to help. So and go advocate in your school for personal finance education, please, because you can make a real difference, not only for yourselves, but I think the legacy for students who come after you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for this presentation. It was amazing.
Take care.
Bye. Okay, everyone. So thank you for all of your questions. That took a lot longer than we expected, but I think everyone enjoyed it, which is great. We are going to have one final presentation that we're going to be teaching about steps to creating a budget. So we're going to do that, and we're going to run a little bit over time. So if you have to go, that's okay. But if you want to stay, you can continue to. So I'm going to start sharing my screen soon, and we can get to that presentation.
Hi guys, so I know this is over time, so I'm going to try to get through this pretty quickly. Today I'm going to be presenting on creating a budget, and more specifically, how do you build, maintain, and update a budget. So before we even get into kind of creating the budget, what you're going to want to do is track your spending habits for an entire month, and this is just recording every purchase you make. And there are different ways to do this, but you're going to do this because you want to find out your current spending priorities. And for example, if you spent a lot on fast food or clothes one month, then one of your spending values or habits might be that you spend a lot on discretionary spending. So once you've kind of figured out what you spend a lot on currently, you're going to kind of decide on what could be improved and what you want to come out of your budget. So then after that, you're going to start off just with calculating your disposable income. So as you guys may have heard, your disposable income is basically what you have left to divide into spending categories after you take out your expenses. And your expenses are all the essential purchases like your housing, your transportation, a lot of those spending categories previously mentioned. So the first step in doing that is to find out your after-tax income. And this is normally your monthly income. So yeah, just looking at your most current paycheck. And then you're going to calculate all of your essential expenses. And I know as teens and young adults, you may not have a lot, but you're just going to calculate all of your housing, your transportation. If you own a car, do you have expenses for that? And all of that stuff previously mentioned. And then you're going to subtract all of those expenses from your after-tax income, and that is how you find your disposable income. And then you're going to take that disposable income and you're going to divide it into spending categories. So reviewing your remaining expenses that you recorded from the previous month and what else you like to spend besides expenses, you're going to create spending categories for your budget. And you can also create new ones for things you want to improve on or things you want to start spending. And then you're going to realistically divide your remaining income into these spending categories based on percentages. So this can all be a bit complicated, but an example of this would be to start out with 50% of your budget towards your expenses. Then you could decide, okay, I want to spend 20% of my disposable income to discretionary spending and 30% to saving. And this is all subjective to what your current spending or what your spending priorities are and what you want to do with your budget. And then finally, it is very hard to keep track of a budget. So we recommend budgeting apps to make this a lot easier and to help track your spending. So there are two apps we recommend. The first is called Buddy Easy Budgeting. And this is really a great app for people who are new to budgeting and want a pretty simple and easy to use app. We recommend that. And then if you have a bit more complicated of a budget and you have a lot of different expenses, with Mint, you can connect it to your bank account and it will actually track all of your purchases. So this is just a little bit more advanced, maybe for college or right after college, just to have a bit more advanced, yeah. And then apps are one way that you can kind of keep track of this, but we also have some other tips. So the first tip is to treat savings as an expense. And this is because far too often savings can be pushed to the side in place of kind of discretionary spending or expenses, but savings is super important as we've learned. And so you're going to want to treat this as one of your expenses to make sure that you're prioritizing it. And then you're going to want to have an end goal or purpose for budgeting your money, because budgeting is not easy. And if you have nothing driving you to complete your budget, then it'll be likely for you to drop it pretty quickly. So you want to have something motivating you. And then also for smaller kind of satisfaction, you want to create incentives for keeping up with your budget. So if you do really great one month, you might want to buy something that you've been wanting to buy just to reward yourself for doing good with that and to give you kind of short-term satisfaction. And then lastly, it's important to check in with your budget every few months, because obviously your spending habits and priorities are going to change over time. And if you don't have a flexible budget, then it's going to come crumbling down. So make sure that you keep checking and updating it. So in conclusion, budgeting can seem a bit scary or something that doesn't really apply to teens, but with all of the benefits, such as creating good spending habits and just keeping out of debt, all of that stuff, it's super important even for teens to budget. And we hope that through all of these resources, through apps, and these tips, that you are empowered to start budgeting. And we do have a few kind of recap questions to see how much you guys learned. So our first question is, what is the first step in creating a budget? So before you even look at your disposable income, what do you need to do to kind of get a look at your current spending priorities? You can just type that in the chat. Yep, I see someone said it. You need to record your expenses for a month, and yeah, just to see your current spending priorities. So our second question is, what do you subtract from your monthly income to find your disposable income? So after calculating all of a certain item, you subtract it from your disposable income. What is that? And again, you can just type it in the chat. Yeah, you're going to subtract your expenses. Awesome. And the third question is, what are some examples of spending categories that were mentioned? And you can also add in your own, just some ideas of spending categories. Yep, awesome. There's expenses and savings, and there's also discretionary spending for things that just you enjoy, like going out to eat and stuff like that. Yeah, awesome. And then lastly, what is one resource to keep track of your budget? Yep, awesome. Mint is a great one, and especially if you have more complicated expenses. Yep, Buddy is the other option. So thank you all so much for staying around, and I hope you guys are empowered to start budgeting. If you have any questions, you can refer to our Instagram or to our email, and I'll pass it back to Armida.
Okay, thanks for that. So that concludes our event. But before you guys go, we also want you to fill out feedback forms so that we see what you like from today, what you'd like improved, and that will help us make next day's event better. So I'm going to type that in the chat shortly, and it would be greatly appreciated if everyone takes the time to fill this out before leaving. So I typed the form in the chat, and you guys can fill that out. And in the meantime, I'm going to play some music. And the recording will soon be uploaded to our YouTube channel. Okay, everyone. So if you filled out the forms, you can go, but if you have not done so already, it'd be greatly appreciated if you do that. And then after, you can leave. Have a nice rest of your day or night. I'm gonna send the link to it again in the chat. I just sent the link for anyone who missed it. Okay, everyone. So thank you to all of you who have filled out the forms. We can conclude the event now. So thank you so much for joining, everyone. Have a nice day or night.